Welcome back. I'm Tom R., pastor of the Village Church, and I'm glad you're here for this video series, The Stories Jesus Loved to Tell. The verses for this session are just a few verses. You'll find them in Matthew 13, 44 through 46. Read those together, and when you finish, turn the video back on and we'll begin our conversation. Jesus loved to tell stories, and what these stories do is they open our eyes to see His life, His kingdom, as He called it. We need help to see this kingdom because it is the kingdom of heaven. It's the kingdom of God, as He called it, which means that the life Jesus reveals is not of our making. It's not our idea. His stories reveal God's intentions for all of us. If I understand the text, what Jesus wants to do when he tells us these stories is He wants us to think about what our lives are ultimately for. These twice told parables make the same point. Treasure is found either by surprise or as the result of diligent, faithful searching. But once the treasure is found, the finder sells everything in order to possess the treasure. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like that when you find it, when you see it, you'd do anything to be part of it. You would give everything to be part of that life. That's why He tells these stories that cause us to think about what our lives are for. Do you remember when you were a kid, people would ask you, what are you going to be when you grow up? I had answers for that question. I was ambitious. I was going to play Major League Baseball. I was just willing to be a second baseman with power. It'd be the bottom of the ninth, 2 out, 1 on. We're down by 1. R sends it over the left field fence. It's a walk-off home run. The crowd goes wild. Playing baseball meant that I'd have to be an astronaut in the off season. You can't do that during the regular season. When we're young, we tend to think of what we're supposed to do with our lives as some kind of job. We're going to be a baseball player, an astronaut, a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker. That's important. But vocation, what we're supposed to do with our lives, it's deeper than just a job. Fred Craddock, he once said, when I was in my teens, I wanted to be a preacher. When I was in my 20s, I wanted to be a good preacher. Now that I'm older, I want more than anything else to be a Christian. I think that's a statement of vocation. You remember U.S. Air Flight 1549. It was the plane that Captain Chesley Sullenberger landed safely into the Hudson River. There was a man on that plane named Rod Kaloje. He was taking a trip with some buddies, and he said when the engines went out, he thought 2 things. He said as the plane silently descended, he thought, in 90 seconds, my life will be over. And then he thought, I hope I did what I was supposed to do with my life. He wasn't thinking, I hope I did everything I wanted to do. That's a different prayer. That's the bucket list. I hope I did everything I want to do. But that's not what he was thinking. I hope I did what I was supposed to do with my life. Do you ever think about that? What you're supposed to do with the collection of days that Providence has granted to you? Jesus said there was a man who was plowing the field. He was preparing someone else's field for the planting of crops. It's what he did. It's what his day was about. But all of a sudden, the blade of the plow struck something, treasure. And in that moment, everything changed. He wasn't looking for change. He wasn't expecting change. He wasn't even aware that his life needed to be different. But in that moment, he sees what he had not seen before. He was overcome with joy. He sold all that he had to purchase this field that he might own this treasure that mattered ultimately. Jesus says when we discover his kingdom, even if we had not been looking for it, when we see life through the lens of his kingdom, we'd give anything to be part of it. There was a man named Porter Halliburton. He was a U.S. Navy lieutenant, and he was shot down in Vietnam. He was a POW. As he was interrogated time and time again, he was always challenged, better place or worse place. If he gave his captors information they wanted, they would improve where he was staying. If he refused to give them, it would be a worse place, a smaller place, a darker place. His final place, he was transferred back into his original cell, but this time he had to share it. He had to share it with Major Fred Cherry. Halliburton was a white man from Davison, North Carolina. Cherry was a descendant of Virginia slaves. It was 1965. Cherry was critically wounded, and Halliburton would have to either take care of him or let him die. Either way, the Vietnamese knew enough about racism in the States that they counted on this arrangement being a worse place for both of them. At first, it was. Conversation between them came slowly. Trust even slower. But things changed. They began to care for each other and to see each other as brothers. Their story is told in the book, Two Souls Indivisible. They learned to see what had been hidden before. And the discovery of a new reality, like hidden treasure, giving themselves to this new life is what saved them. Halliburton and Cherry did more than coexist. They rescued each other. Each of them credits the other for saving his life. Sometimes life shows us what is really important, and it catches us by surprise, like an unexpected treasure hidden in a field. And once we see what really matters, we throw everything else away. Every other possession that we might have in this world is cast aside. Jesus says that's what his kingdom is like. Jesus said there was a merchant of fine pearls. The pearls in his possession did not hold ultimate value, so our merchant searches. Day after day, he travels the cities and the small towns. If he hears of a pearl of particular beauty, he tracks it down. And then, after long searching, he finds the pearl of great value, and he sells all that he has that he might have this one possession. It becomes that which defines his life. Jesus said the kingdom of God is like that. You find that possession that reorients all of your life. The doctor looked at us and said, "It's a girl." And she cried and slapped at the air, and I cried, and my wife Carol cried. Then the doctor said, "Cindy, how about come get this baby?" Cindy was a nurse, and it seemed like a normal thing for her to do. So it took me a minute to realize that they were working rather feverishly with our daughter, Sarah. She had stopped breathing. They say babies do that sometime when they're first born, but I'd never been there for that. And I watched my daughter turn blue from head to toe. She was turning blue, and I prayed, "God, make her breathe." I haven't even said her name out loud yet. Give her my breath, make her breathe. He did, and she was fine. But you know what? I've never been the same. I've always known that somehow my life and joy is connected to that little one. If I understand the text, Jesus says sometimes we know we need to reorient our lives, and we search for answers, we search for purpose, we search for meaning. And sometimes life simply shocks us, catches us by surprise, and all of a sudden we see that which we hadn't really seen before. But once we see God's kingdom, we'd do anything to be part of it. Fred Craddock once said, when I was in my teens, I wanted to be a preacher. When I was in my 20s, I wanted to be a good preacher. Now that I'm older, more than anything else, I want to be a Christian. That's what life is for. And when we find that treasure, we'd do anything to have that life.